Did you ever notice how the most strategic moves in history didn't start with a huge press release or a big blaring announcement on social media? No headline, no viral video. Just someone, maybe like you, working quietly, intentionally, and behind the scenes to shift the whole damn system. Today, we're talking about stealth activism, what it is, why it's often misunderstood, and how you can use it as a tool for long game liberation. This isn't activism light, and it's not hiding. It's strategy, it's adaptation, and it's work. It's the kind of work that builds momentum even in the middle of a backlash or even when vulnerable people are under threat. And I'll let you in on a little secret. In this era, some of the most effective activism anywhere is unseen, uncredited, and making a huge difference. So if you've ever felt like you can't be out loud with your values or out in the streets because of where you work, where you live, or who you're surrounded by, this video is for you. But first, subscribe and tap that bell. We drop new videos here every week that help change agents strategize on how to make a real difference in these incredibly difficult times without sacrificing your health, your time, or your soul. I'm Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin, lawyer, political analyst, founder of the Ripple Effect Institute, and someone who's worked with tens of thousands of change agents in the trenches of building a better world. And here's what I know. Some of the most effective change agents I've worked with, they're not always on the front lines. They're in school boards, hospital systems, faith institutions, and in their own small community organizations, making radical decisions under the radar that really move the needle. This isn't new. In fact, it's deeply historical. Countless movements for civil and human rights began in small organizations, backroom meetings, and quiet interference with systems of power. And if we want to outlast this moment, Trumpism, censorship, rising fascism, we better learn from those who survived other authoritarian threats by adapting and using their tactics. So what is stealth activism? Well, let's get precise. Stealth activism is the strategic use of indirect methods to advance justice, especially in hostile environments where overt activism would trigger resistance or backlash. It's, for instance, embedding equity into curriculum without labeling it DEI. It's training volunteers through community leadership when organizing sounds too radical. It's running a political education campaign in a faith community by calling it a values study. Now, I want to make something clear. This isn't about being vague. It's about being smart enough to know how to get past the gatekeepers to create real change. And if your goal is to win, not just to be right in public or to potentially put marginalized people under threat for the sake of being loud, this is the way in. So let's talk about why stealth activism works, not just anecdotally, but structurally and psychologically. First and foremost, it lowers the defenses of the dominant system. Power doesn't activate full force against what it doesn't perceive as a threat. So by avoiding trigger language and overt symbols, stealth activism can move policies, minds, and culture while power is still sleeping on the shift. Second, stealth activism protects people from targeted retaliation, and this is critical. Especially for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, queer, trans, disabled, and even undocumented leaders, visibility often means very serious risk. Stealth activism keeps the mission moving while reducing the potential threats of participation. Third, stealth activism shifts culture while avoiding performativity. Let's be real. We've all seen folks perform activism online while doing nothing of substance. Stealth activists are often the opposite. They are quiet, consistent, strategic, and deeply effective. And quite often in this day and age, you don't even know their names. Now, let's go to one potential challenge to stealth activism because I know someone's thinking it. Isn't stealth activism just a code for selling out? Isn't it a way to just avoid putting your own body on the line? No, avoidance is about fear. But stealth activism is about strategy and timing. This isn't about diluting values. It's about embedding them in systems that don't want them. And just so we're clear about it, some of the most effective activists I know are not the ones marching directly into the fire in the streets. They're using subversion. They're organizing quietly. They're making real change in their own communities, and no one knows they're doing it. And I'm not knocking those who really want to be out front in the streets. I've been one of them. But movements need both kinds of leaders. They need loud ones out front and stealthy ones working levers behind closed doors and in private community building. This is power building on multiple fronts, not power denying. So let's bring this home with some real world examples, anonymized from our work inside the Ripple Effect Institute. These are real clients that I've worked with, but we're kind of smudging a few of the details to keep them safe. For instance, we've worked with a social worker in Georgia who knew that she wanted to reach trans youth, offer free group support, and send a message that those kids had a safe space. But she didn't want to advertise it or blast it out on social media and thereby put a target on those she was seeking to serve. So what did she do instead? She began by reaching out to local Democratic women's groups where the parents of those trans youth needing support were present. Another example is that we worked with an artist in Deep Red, Tennessee, who wanted to make vulnerable immigrant populations aware of their rights. She created a postcard art project with her work on one side and a list of rights on the other, and she began distributing them at coffee shops and local food trucks and day laborer sites to raise awareness. We've also worked with a community garden founder in a deep purple area, a fellow who set about making a community garden a site to talk about food insecurity in his own community across all party lines and identities. He was thereby able to begin really difficult conversations for change without making them overtly political. Every one of these leaders are deeply committed to justice. They are moving the needle, and they are stealthy as hell. If you're wondering how to start integrating stealth activism into your work, here's how. First, you got to know your terrain. What can be said out loud? What needs coded language? Map the context where you are creating change like a strategist, not just as a speaker or someone announcing events on social media. Second, work with values-aligned framing. Every effort to create change is grounded in values. Your job is to find the overlap between those that you're trying to reach and the values that you may share. Make sure that, for instance, if you are building out in your own community, you know what words will resonate with those and pull them in. Start thinking about how to message on the basis of how to create heroes and involvement where you live. Third, you want to build inside-out networks. This means finding others within institutions that need to shift who are also ready to act. Think about building resistance inside of churches, nonprofits, corporations, or schools. Because change doesn't just come from the outside. Movements win when they've got allies planted everywhere. And fourth, I want to share with you an idea that comes from the great organizing strategist Adrienne Maree Brown. And that is about moving at the speed of trust. It's critical that we build out trusted, private relationships that allow us to work strategically and sometimes in stealth. In order to do that, you have to show up and build relationships with others who share your values. You can do that in local community organizations, in faith institutions, or even just with your neighbors. But if you don't move at the speed of trust, instead of the speed of reactivity, building stealthy and successful change is way more difficult. I want to share with you a quick personal story of how I've used stealth activism myself. Several years ago, before the lockdown phase of the pandemic, I was hired to run a women's leadership training inside a big corporate bank. And let's just say their politics were not aligned with mine. We couldn't say patriarchy, we couldn't talk about gender bias, and God forbid you talked about systemic oppression and white supremacy. Nonetheless, in small group meetings, we trained the women we were hired to serve to negotiate, to organize internally, and most significantly, how to recognize how male-dominated and white-dominated decision-making operated, and how to influence and change it from the inside. A year later, those women launched the bank's first internal equity audit, and they were having explicit conversations with management about how to shift hiring and promotion practices to retain much more diverse talent. They didn't use protest signs, and they didn't even use challenging language. They just used deeply subversive strategy to shift the system in which they lived and worked. If you're in a place right now where overt activism feels dangerous, unsustainable, or maybe just impossible for you given what's going on in your life, please don't internalize that as failure. Stealth isn't silence, it's skill. And your leadership for change, it matters just as much when it's quiet, careful, and calculated as when it's public in the streets and really loud. And if you're interested in growing your leadership for change, I want to invite you to download the Ripple Effect Institute Action Guide for 5 critical leadership shifts to help you scale your impact, whether you're leading a protest or planting seeds for the long term behind closed doors. And if you're done leading alone and you're ready to build movements that last, book a course consultation with us to learn more about the Ripple Effect Institute. Drop me a comment if you like this video. Have you seen stealth activism in your workplace, your school board, your community, or among your neighbors? Have you used it yourself? Tell us about it. And please don't forget to like this video and subscribe and share it with someone quietly doing the work. Because all together, we're building legacy and real change. You're not alone, and you're more powerful than you think. I'll see you in the next video.